All we're being told is that if we're patient a little bit longer, then the economy will recover. It won't of its own volition. That's my main charge against Norman Lamont and his handling of the economy that has left us in this situation.
My main charge against Jon Smith is that he is deceiving and deluding the people of this country. Just to come along and say there is some easy answer to recession is complete and utter nonsense. And he is exploiting a problem, exploiting suffering.
Why on earth did you cut training in the middle of a recession in a country with a skills crisis?
Unlike Jon Smith, I actually believe in controlling public expenditure. He doesn't believe in it one iota.
The Conservatives say cut taxes. We say no. Britain's need at the moment is to recover from recession. Britain's need is to spend the money on the health service.
Tax and spending again dominated the campaign today. A report in the Independent newspaper carried out by the leading accountancy firm Coopers Lybrand suggested that neither party would be able to meet its pledges on spending or tax cutting. Labour had been trying to get across details of its plans to spend more money on education, starting with school repairs. But the accountant's report concentrated attention on whether either Labour or the Conservatives could avoid raising taxes.
If the Conservatives do reduce income tax down to 20 pence in the pound, I really think that they're going to have to increase some other tax in order to compensate, because I don't think that there is room to increase public borrowing above the high level that it would be anyway. Therefore, they may be looking for something like extending the scope of VAT, extending it to food and children's clothes and fuel and so on. In the Labour case, I think if they really want to find the room for some additional public expenditure, then again they're going to have a tax increase. Could come again through VAT extension, or it could come in some other way.
At his morning press conference, Mr Major insisted there would be tax cuts and that the figures published in the government's Red Book at the time of the budget were right.
If you take different assumptions, you get different answers. And the assumptions taken in the report are different from those that we have taken in the Red Book and those that are generally acceptable. And for that reason, you get a different position on the fiscal balance.
In Salford, Mr Kinnock said Labour had to trust the government figures, and he insisted there'd been no increase in the standard rate of income tax under Labour.
We will not be deviating from the thrust of our policies, either in terms of taxation or in terms of commitment to essential public spending in health, education and training. And that's not only because those programs have a social merit in themselves, but because in every case they are essential for the stimulation of an investment-led recovery.
Tonight's opinion polls show Labour opening up their biggest lead of the campaign over the Conservatives. A survey by Harris for ITN's News at 10 puts Labour 6% ahead. It has Labour on 41%, down 1 on last week, the Conservatives on 35, down 3, and the Liberal Democrats on 19, up 3. You can see more of that on News at 10. A poll by Murray for The Times gives Labour a 7-point lead. It has Labour on 42, up 1, the Conservatives on 35, down 3, and the Liberal Democrats on 19, up 2. The third poll by ICM for The Guardian gives Labour a 4-point lead. It has Labour on 41, up 1, the Conservatives on 37, down 2, and the Liberal Democrats 18, up 1. Well, we fed these 3 polls out tonight into our running poll of polls. It's based on the last 8 surveys, or almost 10,000 interviews conducted by NOP, Harris, ICM and Murray. Our poll of polls shows the Conservatives on 37%, Labour 3 points ahead on 40%, and the Liberal Democrats on 18%. Assuming a uniform swing across the country, our poll of polls translates into a House of Commons with Labour on 316 seats, the Conservatives on 295, the Liberal Democrats on 16 and the other parties with 24 seats among them. That makes for a hung parliament with Labour the largest party but 10 seats short of an overall majority. However, this form of projection has tended to underestimate the number of seats won by Liberal Democrats in previous elections. Well, we're joined now in the studio by the Chancellor, Norman Lamont, and his Labour shadow, Jon Smith. Norman Lamont, yesterday Mr Major said you would, if possible, cut taxes year on year. Now, supposing that you get re-elected and you cross the threshold of number 11 Downing Street the day after the election, will you, as a priority, immediately set to work on looking for further tax reductions?
Well, our aim is to get the basic rate of tax down to 20p, but we have always made it clear that that very probably wouldn't be achieved in one Parliament. What the Prime Minister said yesterday was now that we have the 20p ban that particularly helps the lower paid, we can extend that, and we can extend that by small, inexpensive amounts year by year, and thus, at minimal cost to the government's finances, make some progress towards our medium-term objective. That is responsible. We are not going into this election promising vast tax cuts or vast expenditures. We've put forward a programme that is minimal and will cost the taxpayer little.
But some tax cut along the lines you've just described is an immediate priority once you get back into number 11 Downing Street.
As the Prime Minister said, we want to make progress in the next Parliament, and we could do that by extending the 20p band in small steps.
Jon Smith, you're not in government. You don't know the real state of the economy. If it's worse than you've been told, do you have a contingency plan for an austerity budget to cope with it?
No, I'm entitled, I think, to assume that the figures that were given by the Chancellor in his budget to Parliament are correct. I know that there is a report issued today that one wonders whether they're correct or not, and I will only know the final truth when I become Chancellor of the Exchequer and see the situation from within the Treasury. But I'm going on the assumption, which I think is a reasonable one, that Parliament has not been misled. But what the report does indicate is that the recession is very deep. And of course, if we have got a very more difficult economic situation than we expected, then of course progress towards our objectives may be a little bit slower, and we'll have to put even more emphasis on making sure that the economy recovers.
Now, given that you've taken the unusual step of releasing a budget, one can assume that Treasury officials have already started work on that budget. Now, if they turn to you the moment you get into Downing Street, if you win, and say to you, Chancellor, I'm sorry, but you have no chance of putting this into action without seriously damaging recovery, what's your reaction going to be?
Well, my reaction will be that we must redouble our efforts to make sure that we get the economy back on track. Because really what is disturbing people at the moment is the fact that we're still stuck in recession. And of course, nothing is being done to get us out of recession. All we're being told is that it's all in place, and if we're patient even a little bit longer, then the economy will recover. It won't of its own volition. That's my main charge against Norman Lamont and his handling of the economy that has left us in this situation. So there are two things that have got to be done. First of all, in all our spending programmes, we have to be economically realistic. But secondly, we must make sure that we get that productive economy as soon as possible. And that would be the instructions I will be giving to the Treasury is get on with the business of recovery from recession.
That sound prudent enough to you, Norman Lamont?
Well, my main charge against Jon Smith is he is deceiving and deluding the people of this country by thinking there is an easy answer to recession. He seems to think that just spending £1 billion on training is going to take this country out of recession. We are in a situation that has been shared by the United States, Canada, Germany. Just to come along and say there is some easy answer to recession is complete and utter nonsense. And he is exploiting a problem, exploiting suffering, and trying to mislead the people of this country into believing that there is an easy answer to recession. And if he thinks that simply by putting forward a lot of promises that he has not costed, which is a manifesto not based, I believe, on a frank costing, to put that forward to the British people without actually admitting the costs that they as taxpayers would have to pay is frankly irresponsible.
Well, I don't think it's irresponsible for an opposition party to put forward a budget. It's more than the Conservative Party ever did. Before the '79 election, they were busy concealing projected increases in VAT. I've actually put the budget forward so that people can consider it during the election. But it is very important that we take action to get out of recession. Norman Lamont talks about training. I think one thing which I cannot understand, and I don't think the people understand, is why in the middle of a recession, for 2 years in succession, we saw very large cuts in the training programme. Now, investment in training will improve the quality of our economy. I've asked him already today to justify why they cut the training budget in the middle of a recession, and I got no answer, and I don't think there is a sensible answer to that. Why on earth did you cut training in the middle of a recession in a country with a skills crisis?
First of all, unlike Jon Smith, I actually believe in controlling public expenditure. He doesn't believe in it one iota. And we are spending 2.5 times on training what we were in 1979. But we have to control spending. The Labour government are not interested in controlling public spending. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put forward a manifesto with £38 billion worth of promises. Now, Jon Smith says, I have put forward a budget, and I am the first Shadow Chancellor who has done this. This is just a load of humbug, because what Neil Kinnock said he was going to do, he said in Meet the Challenge he was going to put forward a programme which was costed. He said he was going to cost his manifesto. Now, why has Kinnock not stuck by that promise? If he breaks that promise, how easily is he going to break every other promise?
Jon Smith,
I don't believe that
Jon
he
Smith.
can keep
Well,
those promises.
the fact is I did produce a shadow budget, and I have set out far greater detail than any opposition party has ever done. But can I? Well, it has been.
It isn't
I have
costed.
shown how I can find the resources for another £1 billion in the health service, over and above what you're prepared to spend, and another £600 million for education. But you know, this argument can be crystallised quite easily. We heard the Prime Minister today talking about cutting taxes, and every time he goes along and says he's going to cut taxes, along comes Norman Lamont and says there's very little room for manoeuvre. Every time Major says that without doubt there are going to be cuts in taxes, as I heard him saying on his soapbox somewhere in England today, Norman Lamont comes on this programme and says there'll only be tiny little ones. Surely most people can see it in this way. Does it not make more sense for a country stuck in recession to spend the money on training rather than on cuts in taxes? We are very clear on that, and if you went on with a programme of cutting taxes, such as your Prime Minister indicates he would do, you prejudice the public investment upon which a great deal of the recovery in this country depends.
I don't believe that it makes any sense as a way of getting this country out of recession to increase taxes. And the shadow budget that Jon Smith has put forward actually has the largest increases in direct taxation that have been for years in this country. He has put forward a programme. I have costed it, and I have done this as carefully and as meticulously as I possibly can. I have costed it £38 billion.
Nobody believes
Times today, well, the Times today costed it at £29 billion.
The Economist called it absurd.
Coopers and Lybrands costed it somewhere in the high 20s. Whichever of us is right, there is no doubt that cannot be afforded, even on the most optimistic assumptions about growth. Now, some people have said that my assumptions about growth are too optimistic. If that causes any problems for me, how much greater are the problems it must cause for the Labour Party, promising to spend as though there were no tomorrow? They're not interested in the control of public spending.
There's a very simple test here, and it is, if there is a difficulty in the economy, what is a government going to do? Is it going to cut taxes or use the same money to maintain our public services, to invest in training and do all the other things that we think are needed to improve both the economy and our services? We are very clear on that, but the Conservative Party every day of this election goes about pretending that you can cut taxes and at the same time maintain that investment. I put it quite clearly to the people of this country. Are you better to get some adjustment in taxation in a downward direction in a difficult economic situation, or is it better for that money to be spent on training our young people? We are very clear about it. I still haven't got an answer from Norman Lamont as to why he cut the training budget in the middle of a recession when a country that lacks skills.
I have been asking Jon Smith for over a year, getting on for 2 years, as to how he was going to pay for all the extravagant promises in his programme. Today, in this morning's newspapers, in the Daily Mail, we had revealed the fact that some of his own advisers, Mr. Andrew Graham, who is, I understand, his chief economic advisor, has been asking him the same questions, because he put forward in a memo the suggestion that actually their so-called investment plans could not be afforded, and he actually put it to them that either they would have to put up taxes or they would have to cut spending. So within the Labour Party, they themselves have been asking Mr. Smith exactly the questions that I have been asking him, and there has been no answer. I am absolutely convinced that their programme cannot be afforded.
Jon Smith.
Well, the test is very simple and very clear, and I've already put it to Mr. Lamont. If the choice is to cut taxes, as his Prime Minister is promising on his soapbox in every town in the country, and to maintain our public services, the Conservatives say cut taxes. We say no. Britain's need at the moment is to recover from recession. Britain's need is to spend the money on the health service. Britain's need is to enlarge our educational opportunities. Now, you've been in charge of the British economy for some time now. You've done absolutely nothing to get us out of recession. You've told us month after month after month that recovery was round the corner. It never comes. Green shoots were sprouting all over the Conservative Party conference. Nothing happened. And your manifesto hardly recognises that we're in a country in the grip of unemployment, in the grip of business failures. I mean, it's a woeful economic record. The sooner it stops, the more chance we'll get to improve our public finances.
John is determined to talk on and to take up the time
well,
of the programme.
I would like in the last 2 minutes to put 2 points to
you will notice that he refuses to answer the question that I've repeatedly put.
Yes.
He is right in saying this. The choice is between a party that believes in lower taxation and a party that believes in higher
public
taxation.
services.
But the question that he is not addressing is, given that he is in favour of much higher spending, given that his advisor, Mr. Graham, actually admits that their programme cannot be afforded.
That's not true. He does
that
nothing
is what
of the
it
kind.
says.
I want
I've
to
got
ask you in the
document
last
here.
minute and a half that we have left, one question each. Norman Lamont, can you absolutely rule out raising direct or indirect taxes within 2 years of returning to Downing Street if you're re-elected?
We will not have to increase taxes.
Under no circumstances.
I cannot see any circumstances in which that would be necessary. I believe that our borrowing will fall as the economy recovers, and I do not believe that it will be necessary for us to increase
And
taxes.
let me just stress, that is direct and indirect taxes.
Yes.
That's VAT, everything else.
Yes.
Jon Smith, the Conservatives are not going to talk you out of raising taxes for some people. Why won't you travel the path, if it has to be done, of raising taxes for everyone in work, 1 penny on income tax, as the Liberal Democrats?
Because I've made a careful judgment in the budget which I presented, did not flinch from proposing tax increases where I thought they were merited. But I believe the ordinary families, the ordinary people of this country, have had quite a heavy tax burden under a Conservative government which has concerned itself almost exclusively with people at the top of the income scale. And I think I've shown in the budget which I've presented that we can get recovery from recession, we can improve our public services, and we're going to have a fair tax system too.
Jon Smith, Norman Lamont, thank you both very much for joining us.